excursus, I think we need to discuss, I guess, significance of 7 churches. These excursus are very important because we are not able to explain all the verses, but the important debates are being discussed in our excursus. So please make sure that you look at that, right? 3 views are found in the commentaries about what does the 7 churches actually refer to. Number 1, these 7 churches are historical only, right? Those things that are explained in 7 churches are not applicable today. Almost all agree that churches mentioned in chapters 2 and 3 were actual historical churches, right? Almost all agree that. The question is whether they were historical only, or do they represent the church today, right? So the major objection with this view that it limits the value of these chapters for succeeding generation. It cannot explain why these 7 churches were chosen over others in the area, some more prominent than this. There were other churches in that area, but were not chosen. There are only 7 churches. So why these particular 7 churches are chosen if it is only historical? So I think that is not a right kind of view. Second view, what does this church actually, is it historical? Now, second view suggests that it is historical and representative. What is that? According to this view, these 7 churches were chosen because they represent conditions common in local churches, not only at the end of the 1st century, but in the subsequent period of church history. So, in the subsequent period of church history, the common experiences that we usually see are being represented by these 7 churches. Now, assuming this to be true, question is raised about the significance of the number 7, right? Why there was 7 churches chosen? Why not 8? Why not 6? Right? In order to represent. Ask the reader to understand these churches provide a comprehensive, even exhaustive list of the conditions found among the church in a given period. Furthermore, are these conditions represented by 7 churches mutually exclusive, or maybe some overlapping and blending? So, yes, it represents. Okay, first of all, why there is 7, right? Now, the character of one church is that all the 7 churches have got 7 distinctive characteristics, or are they overlapping? Those are some of the questions need to be asked as the second view being addressed, right? Now, I'm not saying that is a wrong view, but I'm saying there are questions to be addressed. Third view is looking the 7 churches. Yes, they are historical churches, but prophetic too. What is the prophetic? Proponents of this view argue that these churches were not only historical, like in the area of Asia Minor, Turkey, modern Turkey, not only historical, they are representative too, right? That is including both 2 views, but the third view argues or adds a little more. They say they are prophetic. That is, they prefigure 7 consecutive stages of church history, at least Western church history, from the apostolic age to the rapture of the church and the onset of the tribulation period. So that is the explanation that 7 churches represent 7 periods in the Western church history, while allowing for all 7 churches to be present in given period. Nonetheless, one of the churches will reflect a dominant characteristics of the church of that period more than the others. So, for example, now, how do they explain that it is prophetic? 7 churches are prophetic. How do they explain? For example, the first church known as Church at Ephesus. Church at Ephesus covers a period from AD 30 to 100, mainly the first century of the church. So they call it as Apostolic Church. Second is Smyrna, all right, covers from 100 to 313 until the conversion of the Emperor Constantine. So there are, remember, Nero and all other people. So, not only Nero, it was like time of persecution. So they say Smyrna represent the persecuted church from this time period. The next is Pergamum. Pergamum is a state church, right? State church. Like, so the period from AD 313 to 590 until the dominance of papacy, right? So it is in the churches were under the state church. So they call the next one Thyatira as a papal church. It's about 1,000 years of history, right? About 1,000 years, like 590 to 1570. The next is Sardis. Sardis kind of reformed church, right? The church at Sardis represents reformed church, AD 517 to 1719. Then, you might have noted Philadelphia, there was nothing wrong about them mentioned in that in the Bible. So they say it's a missionary church because the modern missionary movement began from AD 1790, right? So missionary church, and that goes on until AD 1900. Then the last church known as Apostate Church, that is from AD 1900 to even it goes on. All right, so this is the third way of looking these 7 churches, right? I said one is historical only, second is historical and represented. They represent all the churches. Third, historical, representative, and prophetic. Right? That's the third way of looking at it. All right. Now the conclusion. What is right? What is the right view? There are a number of points that should be noted in support of the third view. Right? First, there is remarkable correspondence between 7 churches and the stages or developments within the Western church history. Yeah. There are remarkable correspondence, connections, similarities that are being discussed in these churches and the church history period that we are talking here. True. Second, such an approach to chapters 2 and 3 is consistent within the nature of Revelation as a prophecy, right? Because Revelation is a prophetical book. So looking at the 7 churches as prophetic would make much sense. Third, expression after these things in 4:1 suggests that the events recorded there follow immediately after the events recorded at the end of chapter 3. Now, so yes, there are good arguments for the third view, but right, the prophetic, this view, I'm saying a but here. What is that? Having said that there are several arguments against this view as well. Perhaps the major obstacle with the third view is over the matter of historical correspondence. Yeah, there are some similarities. Now the question is, do the seven church fit precisely the known stages of church history? Do they fit precisely? Oh, no. Or putting it another way, can the various stages of church history legitimately be characterized by the seven churches? The text itself would seem to suggest the answer, no. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the way the historical correspondence is not really fitting. For example, here is the problem. What is the problem? For example, the promise of seeing the Lord's return is given not only to the Philadelphian church. Remember, we talk about Philadelphia, yes, right here, according to them, 1790 to 1900. But if you look at the text, the promise is not given only to the Philadelphian church. It is also given to Church of Thyatira. So second coming is already discussed. Such a promise would be difficult to understand if the Church of Thyatira characterized the churches from AD 590 to 1517. Because the promise is that God is going to care as when he comes back for the church. For this and other reasons, the majority of those holding to the third view are forced to make some adjustments in the sequence of seven churches similar to the following. So therefore, sometime they made a change. They said, okay, we can call this way, maybe yes, Ephesus is 30 to 100, period of church of Ephesus represent the 70 years, church of Smyrna represent 100 to 330, church at Pergamum represents 313 to 590, true. Then they would say, Thyatira, yes, it represents not only, all right, 590 till rapture, or 517 till rapture, Sardis. Philadelphia, 517 till the rapture, and Laodicea, 1900 to tribulation. So you see, they made they made changes to the representation. As may be seen from the above, the adjustments are significant and appear to be somewhat contrived. It looks like now the original talk of 7 stages of church history is not valid. This raises the question whether similarities between the 7 churches and stages of church history are accidental or limited intentionally and thoroughgoing. So, having said that, the second objection to the prophetic view is that it appears to be in conflict with the concept of imminence. Now, remember, what is imminent? Imminent return of Christ, right? Imminent means at any time, anytime. Now, if the 7 churches represent 7 periods of church history, that means there is an issue with imminent return. How do they know that Christ will return at any time? Rather, they will say, Christ will return after the 7 periods of churches are over. In what sense can Lord's return be viewed as any moment, when in fact, various stages of church history, as understood by this view, must take place first? In other words, if the church must go through the 7 stages before the Lord returns, in what sense his return is imminent? Right? That is a second objection. Now, I would say there is pray. A third objection is that there is no explicit indication in the text to suggest that these 7 churches should be taken as a prophecy of church history. There is no indication at all. So, because the evidence of the third view is somewhat mixed, and because there is no consensus among the proponents of the third view as to the sequence intended by the 7 churches, growing number of interpreters have opted for one of the first 2 views, with the second view becoming more popular. They are representative of the spiritual state of churches. Spiritual state of churches. It's not, doesn't represent church in a particular century, but 7 churches represent entirety of churches. The 7 are chosen because they are comprehensive of the church at any given period. These conditions are not mutually exclusive, but they do overlap some degree. So what that means, what? I basically look at the second view as the right view. Right view that, yes, these 7 churches are historical and they represent churches throughout the century without any distinction, like 7 stages of church history, anything like that. They represent generally the condition of the church throughout the century. That's what I think. All right, friends, that's what we are. Okay. We're going to stop here for Revelation. We need to look at the judgment seat of Christ, right? We have a lot more to discuss on the judgment seat of Christ. So we will look at that next week.